Hello, everyone. My name is Rebecca. My pronouns are she, her, and I am one of the co directors of the Notebooks Collective. We founded ourselves in 2021, and we are a virtual literary arts space focused on community, connection, and continued learning. And we are so excited to welcome Katherine and Octavio here tonight. Our next in conversation will feature Keith S. Wilson and Callie Siskel on June 9th at 7:30 p.m. In addition, we have a special notebooks reading on June 24th in memory of Jennifer Martelli, and it is to raise money for the Eastern Massachusetts Abortion Fund. Please check out our website, or even better, sign up for our newsletter to learn more. And Lisa will put those links in the chat. The Notebooks Collective believes that Black Lives Matter and that we have a responsibility to undo harm and at the same time uplift joy. We acknowledge that as a virtual organization, our offices are on the lands of the Kickapoo, Nipmuc, Agawam, Massachusetts, and Pawtucket tribes. Native peoples across the world continue to preserve and celebrate their cultures, and we encourage you to support Native writers and artists. And as we do this land acknowledgement, we want to recognize those who are suffering from conquest and terror across the globe and in our own country. We stand in solidarity with them. We are glad you have joined us tonight to be together. And now I will turn it over to Lisa.
Hi, everybody. My name is Lisa. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the other half of the team at the Notebooks Collective, and I have a story time for you. When Becca and I started thinking about the Notebooks Collective, we really focused on the collective part, envisioning a group of poets and creatives that continues to grow and learn from one another. As we started to have in-conversation events, we reached out to those guests to ask them who they'd like to see in conversation. And I'm pleased to welcome one of those past guests, Marcela Sulak. She was in conversation with Brandel France de Bravo in July of last year. When we began to plan the next season of conversations and reached out to previous guests to ask them for recommendations, Marcela came back to us immediately with tonight's pairing. So we thought it would be a really nice treat to have her introduce them. So please, everyone, welcome Marcela Sulak.
Hi, everyone. And I also see my Brandel France de Bravo, who was in conversation with me when we were on. So hi, Brandel. And I would like to start with just a few quotes from the books that we're about to hear. Time moves through us, not us through time, notes Katherine D. Oldmixon Garza in her debut collection, Life, Afterlife, a Book of Hours. We are made of time, not flesh and blood, says Octavio Quintanilla in his 2024 National Book Award long-listed collection, The Book of Wounded Sparrows. We are in this body of grief together, notes Katherine. What does it matter? I have made it thus far, and still there is nothing that can heal this rift between myself and the boy I have crisscrossed like uncharted territory, answers Octavio. No border to grief, or the body, or the spirit. I am open. My heart broke open, writes Katherine. And Octavio, praise to those who never find their path. Praise to the things without language. As you can tell from the titles of their books and the lines I've taken from them, Katherine and Octavio share an interest in the condition of doubleness, temporal, physical, and its attendant loss. In their works, we see time, the Spanish and English languages, and lives pass through the bodies of their speakers. In their work, past lives and afterlives are present in the present. We see boundaries and borders that are both arbitrary and strange, but also deadly consequential and terrible. Both poets write with the community and others behind them, Katherine with her beloved husband, Toro, after his death, and Octavio with his previous life that's been cut short in Spanish in Mexico, with family and parents and siblings, cousins. And both poets bear witness to a deep and sudden break. after which both continue to live, but in a new place or station in life, or language or landscape, with a different relationship to time and space, and both incorporate images into their daily practice, painting, drawing, and photographing. Both of these poets live in Central Texas, Octavio in San Antonio and Katherine in Austin, and various borders and landscapes of Texas have narrative implications in their work. And of course, both of these poets are personal friends and wonderful people, and I look forward to hearing their conversation unfold as they discuss Life After Life and the Book of Wounded Sparrows. And I'll introduce them a little more formally individually. Katherine Oldmixon Garza is Professor Emerita of English at historic Huston-Tillotson University in Austin, where she taught world literature, creative writing, and language and culture. She has a PhD in medieval literature from the University of Texas at Austin and an MFA in creative writing from the University of New Orleans. And these days, she directs the Poetry at Round Top Festival, which you guys really ought to check out. It's held each spring in Central Texas. Life Afterlife is her debut full-length poetry collection. Octavio Quintanilla is the author of the 2014 poetry collection, If I Go Missing, and the 2024 National Book Awards long-listed The Book of Wounded Sparrows. Also, the 2025 Las Horas Imposibles, The Invisible Hours, which is the winner of the Ambrogio Prize at the Academy of American Poets. And he served as the 2018-2020 Poet Laureate of San Antonio. His visual work has been exhibited basically all across Central Texas, and he is the founder and director of the Literature and Arts Festival, Verso Frontera. It's held in October, I think, right? And is the publisher of Alla Brava Press. He teaches in the MA/MFA program at Our Lady of the Lake University in San Antonio. So please enjoy what I know will be a fascinating, moving, necessary conversation between Katherine and Octavio.
Wow, what a beautiful introduction, Marcela. Thank you so much. And thank you so much as well to Becca and Lisa and to Octavio for being here to have a conversation with me. Octavio?
Hi. We're on thinking, trying to um, trying to bring myself into this moment. Um, I don't know why, but I'm always running late, even though I prepared like 2 hours ago, and somehow I still find myself in predicaments that I feel like I can control, but I feel like I can't. For example, it's just telling you I'm on my laptop as opposed to my desktop because the power went out a couple of days ago. We had rain, and it's my mistake of not getting that ready for today. So, nonetheless, I'm here, and I'm just trying to take a breath and talk about books. Talk about your beautiful book. I just want to thank Marcela and Becca and Lisa for holding this event. And yeah.
Yeah. So why don't we start by, because I think there's some similarities in the way that our books are structured. They're different, obviously, but there's something unusual about them that I think is also has some kinds of resonances. So why don't we begin by talking about how these two books are structured and then maybe read a poem or
Um,
yeah.
well, I was looking at your book again. I forget the date when you came to San Antonio to read at the Twig. I think it was last year somewhere. And about your book, about your beautiful book. It's really beautiful. I love how some books feel uh, when you hold them. This is one of those books, right? And I love the size of it, and I think it's kind of reminiscent of mine. It might be, I don't know. It's really, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and in terms of structure, I don't know what you think. What do you see? What are some
What
of
do I
the parallels
see?
that you?
Well, so what I see literally
Uh-huh.
are some paintings that are in the midst of the of times. My book in Life Afterlife, it's interpolated. It's two books in one, right? So, it's
Right,
interpolated with the Book of Hours, which are those little lyric lines on let's see, this will be the verso page, and then the poems are on the recto pages. So the two books are interwoven like that, and I think that there's something similar there to the way that you have the visual art brought
right.
into with the poems.
Yeah. I mean, that's the way that I see my book, a book within a book. The lyric narrative poems, and then you have the visual poems that I call film textos. And those poems, the visual poems, are 25, I think, and they all make up the last poem of the book, which is a translation
Yeah.
from the Spanish. So one of the things that, and I, oh, you know what I do? I tell you, one of the things that the press did, Texas Review Press, was to take all those uh, the visual poems of Oldmixon and to do a limited edition archival archival broadsides of this longer poem composed of
Yeah.
images and text in Spanish. And so I think this is kind of like a concrete, uh, this is a concrete evidence of this idea of the book, right? And I see that in yours too. I see uh, that the book of hours and I don't know, becoming almost like yeah, it's a book that also adds a lot of for me just added a lot of we're almost like punctuations, like a moment for me to stop and take a breath. And then you read the small, they're not small, well, some of them are short sentences, poetic lines,
Yeah.
and and they they take your breath away because they're so they're like for me it's your way of sensing the world outside of yourself. You know, it's a lot of the other more narrative poems um, are going in. You know, you go into to a different to that landscape that we can't really see ourselves. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's right. And the hours, those little short lyric lines are all pretty much in the present. Um, so the present tense runs through the book as a thread, which, I say literally held me in present, in the
right,
present at a time when my life was ruptured um, by Arturo's death, his sudden death. Uh, and then the poems move through the seasons cyclically, but they also move through geography in some very different ways and through time in some different ways as well, which I think happens in the Book of Wounded Sparrow as well, right?
yeah,
That you have this movement in time and not necessarily in a linear sense.
yeah, you're right about that. I think the Wounded Sparrows. Well, it's almost like it's like a continuation of time. It's like if we talk about loss and grieving, it's just it's I think book is an attempt to articulate how something, in my case, familial separation and geographic dislocation stays with you. And the opening poem in the book uh, is the speaker, an adult speaker, trying to go back to speak to that boy, to that 9-year-old boy, and then everything else becomes memory. But also and specifically, I think the visual work. I think the visual poems work the same way that your book of hours might be working. That is, um, it's in terms of time and attention, it's just more present. You know, specifically in the use of Spanish, something that I see kind of. I think Marcela briefly mentioned. Really got taken away once from me once once I crossed over here, and so. But also, writing in Spanish is such a, it's kind of like the sense of smell. People speak of the sense of smell being a trigger for memory. Writing in Spanish being my first language, first language from which I was loved, you know, uh, even punished, etc. Triggers memories that I cannot access in English. And so the book is that continual movement between past and present, and also in some ways looking into the future by writing the book itself at the end.
It gives the continuity to it. Do you want to read that opening poem?
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I'll copy the books. I'm gonna have to read from the computer.
You want to borrow my book?
Yeah, check it out.
I'll get it ready for you.
The first poem that opens the book. If you've seen the book actually, this is the first lyric poem, but the book opens up with a letter that I found, that my mother gave me before she passed away. That I wrote to her when I first got here. I was 9, and it's written in Spanish, and then I blacked out its text, and then um, that text became, or that letter became the framing of the book. It opens the book with a specific text, and then it closes the book with the same letter blacked out with different text. That speaks to the nature of never being able to return, to got lost. And so this poem is the first lyric poem. It's called Vanishing Point. In a handwritten letter, give me a second, just make this up. Vanishing point. In a handwritten letter, you appear, bring an answer like fog. I forget the question, but it must have looked like a skinny child abandoned by God. Yes, God, the one with a capital G, the one who squints at us from his great white heaven, and the word abandonment into the monster it is. I'm old enough not to test your emotions. I might even be anymore casket in my own children's memory. What does it matter? I have made it. I've made it this far, and still there's nothing. This rift between myself and this boy I have crisscrossed like uncharted territory. I have talked to him. Who knows if he hears what I say or if he reads what I write? He's always a boy when I saw him. I look down so I can see him. And he looks up so he can see me. There is nothing to help us touch. Yeah. Do you want to read one of your own?
Sure. I think, let me read this poem that I think has some echoes with that. Obviously, again, very different, but touches on some of those themes that we find running in both books in our own individual way. And let me say, I'm going to read the poem. The poem is Lengua Tejana. I'm going to read the poem and then I'll read the hour that's across from it. So there'll be slight pause and then I'll read that, and it's only one sentence. Be done. Lengua Tejana. Your tongue in my mouth, wanting sweet blood-red cactus blooms. Spring nopales stripped of thorns, you stir into my morning eggs. The skin of your voice, sun-baked brown, darts claro y verdad. Hummingbird palabras resting in your English of purple and gold lantana. Tea of hibiscus and rainwater. Chili piquins and avocado in the molcajete. What you say hovers and slips to flesh. The kindergartner ran away from home. Rent was abuelita watering rows of corn. Rent was abuelita cocinando sopa de sun yellow squash blossoms. In the morning, he was returned to the nuns. In school, they beat you for speaking. You tell me secrets. I wonder about gathering peyote, sickness and revelation, the floods you rose from. We cross borders, borders cross over us. We are one another at the other side. I live where you are native. Where we live, nuestras lenguas son mingling vines. A hummingbird lights on an apricot branch and appears a blossom. What if we began with grief is just another word for love? Yeah. So we have both, have this, both of those languages, but we come to at the languages, we come to the languages in very different ways, right?
Yeah, I mean that's one of the probably, yeah, I guess you will believe me. I take a lot of practice
Uh-huh.
when I read, and that's one of the things that I noticed. I actually like uh, the way you string together some of the some of the clauses in your sentences with Spanish. You know, using some uh, I don't know, small words. I don't know, like son, mira, uh, almost one syllable, two syllable words, but that are significant because I feel this is where you are probably the most intimate in speaking to your beloved, because uh, I also get from your poems that, it seems like you understand Spanish, but you might not speak it as well. And I think there's a moment in one of the poems uh, where the beloved says, "What do you mean?" When the speaker's trying to speak Spanish, and so the peppering of those small Spanish words, I think, or at least I felt they were not for me; they were for the one who recognizes you in a way that I will never be able to, or the reader would.
Yeah.
So they become for me very, once you string all those little Spanish words together, they become a poem in themselves, and they become a love letter. You know, so that's your relationship to the Spanish in the book, and mine is a little different. I don't even know. I think there's only like one or two lines in that book that are in Spanish. As a matter of fact, know. Uh, in the lyric poems, obviously in the visual poem, there's every line is in Spanish, most of them anyway.
Yeah.
Which is I don't know. I don't know. What do you make of that?
I was going to ask you, what do you make of that? What do you make of how the Spanish rises in certain places but not in others?
Like in your book or mine?
In yours.
Oh, in
Oh,
mine.
I can answer in mine, but yours, I'm curious.
How the Spanish is working. Well, there's a there's a reason why I use Spanish in my frontextos and my visual poems. Those of you who are not familiar with frontextos, it's a blending of two words, frontera and texto. Border and Text. I'm from the Rio Grande Valley in South Texas, and it was just a way for me to honor the place where I come from. And I started this From Texto project in 2018. And one of the things um, that I started doing was, as you know, Catherine, and somebody who know my work, I upload a From Texto every day to social media. And in 2018, I decided to write in Spanish for two reasons. Back then, I would hear a lot of stories of uh, people who spoke Spanish in public being attacked verbally or physically. And also, it was my chance to relearn something that I didn't know. And by that, I mean, I grew up speaking Spanish on the border, but it was not, it was home Spanish, it was borderland Spanish, frontera Spanish. It
Yeah.
was not formal academic Spanish, you know. And one of the things that I've always wanted to do was to write in Spanish. And I would keep getting offers to go speak in like conferences for, you know, writers who write in Spanish. And I knew their Spanish was not mine. So it was my way to teach myself. So, but one of the things obviously that I discovered is that by writing in Spanish, I was tapping into memories that, like I said before, I could not access by trying to remember
Yeah.
in in my second language, you know, which is English. And so when I started writing Spanish, I'm like, oh crap, that lemon tree, or you know, my grandmother's pomegranate tree, and that took me to places um, that became, in many ways, my second book, which is written in Spanish uh, with a translation. But that book, So Es Imposible, it's Impossible Hours, I wrote it completely in Spanish,
Yeah.
thinking in Spanish, feeling in Spanish. This book, When You're Holding in Your Hand, I wrote that with my in English. So I don't know if that answers your question, uh, but I definitely wanted to have Spanish in the Wounded Sparrows, uh, not only to complement, you know, the narrative anchor, but also as a form of play. Because if you know Spanish, and then you read the poem translated at the end, you're gonna realize that some of the things don't correspond, you know.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and so it's a way to, I don't know.
Yeah,
But
you're
not in
introducing a kind of an openness, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
that there's some play of meanings, right?
it's a way to introduce mystery, to introduce someone who's really interested in what is going to try and find out. Well, is this, you know, is this what I'm saying? And that's how you get, you know, that's how you write dissertations for PhD.
Well, that's been a while.
Right.
But I did study some book of hours along the way, medieval wise. Um, what was I thinking? Oh, I was thinking about Spanish. Yeah, in Life After Life. Um, the Spanish is, as you have noted in my book, a language of intimacy, right? And it's always mixed with English. It's never the only time that I have written a poem completely in Spanish, I think. I say that. No, it's always mixed in this book. It's always the only time I've written a poem completely in Spanish. I needed a lot of help. It's not in the book. And you were one of the people who was gracious enough to help me with it. And that was when I was writing the song for Beto, Amor Encendido. But the reason that I didn't think through a reason for putting Spanish in there. I put Spanish and English mixed in there because that's the language we spoke at home.
Right.
That's what came, naturally and comfortably. And if I got into the poem writing trance, that was going to be the language that came in whatever imperfect way that it did, right?
But I don't see it as, I guess I'm one of those readers that I'm very critical when I read poets that I don't know whether they're Spanish or something else. And it kind of sounds gimmicky, but yours, I think it just feels right. Specifically once you start, reading the book and entering, entering that sense of loss and that sense of, I mean, it's like, um, I kind of sense that throughout there's this longing of the speaker, like for her body to disappear. And so those little words in Spanish, it's almost like a gradual disappearance of this other life.
Yeah.
Like those are the little remnants that stayed behind. So for me, that's how it was working also, um, like this, like you said, this other intimacy is also in many ways disappearing, uh, and in relation to the speaker's longing for her body to disappear. Well, at least that's how I'm reading part of the narrative. What I'm saying. Uh, I don't know, but yeah, I don't know. That was not a question. That was just like me.
I love it. It brings me though. I'm going to ask you to read another poem. Will that be all right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay. Um, the one I had in mind was Never Been to El Paso.
What page is that on?
Let's see here. Let's see here.
Well, let me see if I can get to El Paso, Texas.
I color coded my little tabs and I didn't write down page numbers. I don't have page numbers in my book, so this, Okay, it's on page 44.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm on page 31 right now. 43. No, it's not on page 44 in my, because I'm using the proof of
Ah,
uh,
it follows our
I've
separation.
never been to in Basel, Texas. And honestly, I never read this. I never read this poem out. I've never read it or anything, so I don't know how it's going to come out.
Oh,
Is
all
it?
right.
Is
A
it?
debut.
It has a different type of music. You
Uh-huh.
probably noticed it has a different type of rhythm. So anyway, I'll just read it. Never been to El Paso, Texas. You're black in the center of my eye, black like the map where I draw a faceless face, black with the blood of my bitten nails, black like the sharp edge of water that touches your feet and moves you to dance, black like the shore where I always lose you, black. Second. Black like the room I draw with my awful longing, black me two lines of the notebook where I have glued a strand of your hair. Black every time. It's really embarrassing. Okay, here you go. Black every time I open myself with your name syllables. Black when I try to blur my skin with what's left of you. Black is what remains. Black like mist, this black trail I follow. Black in my days, losing the hours. black like the broken windshield of my youth, black like the highway I drove in to lose you, black like the ink of her tongue, make me black in that sea, make me black to the taste.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
so sorry about reading it so screwed up.
Yeah. No,
The PDF.
it's a
Okay.
lovely, it's a lovely poem. And the reason I was thinking of it is you said that there was something in Life After Life that suggested that I wanted to disappear my body. And I think it's more of a merger,
Right.
right? Yeah. So if I may, the a poem from Life After Life that I think has resonance with that poem and some others in your book as well that deal with the body and the um, yeah, how we feel about it. This is As the Vibration is the Violin. So the pulse becomes the ocean and pushes the background music out from its shore. And the hands are yours as they were on the beach or our living room floor, kneading the knots from my neck and shoulders. And my back, I see eyes closed, is yours as I trace the birthmark over your heart, the thin surgical scar at the end of your spine. My neck, your neck, its folds and nape curls, and that one wild hair on your shoulder on my shoulder. I have never seen my backside, although I know yours like I know the back of my hands, your hands, splayed to rub the tendons as I would after you came home from a gig aching from the drum skins. All the muscles played by touch, yours now, stronger, sinewy. My soft flesh, yours still firm. You are me, in me, your spirit, and I speak to you. Come, stay. We are only one body now.
That's a beautiful poem.
Thank you. Yeah, that way of getting over a rupture to become one. I used to say a lot of times in Facebook posts, like in Mexico when they have happy hour and they say uno para dos, right? You only order one because if you order two, then you're going to end up with four, right? The bringing it together.
Yeah, one of the I think now I'm thinking about the role of the body in my own poems, or the role the body plays in my poems. And um, I think, I don't know. I guess I never thought about it, but right now, when I think about the body in my own poems, I'm thinking about my relationship to language and
Uh-huh.
how I can access, to what extent do I access it, do I manipulate language so I can reconstruct something that I really can't remember. I think I have a poem that speaks about that. How do I write about something that I know happened, that I know it's in there, but I can't really remember, you know?
Uh, Let me see here. I am remembering that you have a poem that asks those questions. Now I'm trying
Yeah,
to remember which one of the poems it is.
I think it's a micro essay it's the poetics of separation, I think.
Ah, uh-huh. Our
Uh,
separation. Let me see if I can. I had my finger on that one a second ago.
you want me to read that? The
Yeah, it'd be
poetics of
great.
separation.
Hmm.
I think this poem kind of is asking those type of questions about, to what extent does language help us remember? And then when it doesn't, what do we do about it? And I don't think the poem answers anything. It's just a poem. The
Uh-huh.
poetics of separation, or Michael essay. Poetry remembers that distance can be made of suffering. Distance between blood cells, between two words on this page. between a mother and a son. And so I carry my past like a bag full of dirt, but I can't make words grow out of it and write what I can't remember. What is the Spanish word for water? What is the Spanish word for longing? What is the Spanish word for failure? My relationship with language is absence. One, I can't shape with my hands, not like clay or fire. I try, and for this trying, I rely on what my body thinks it knows. I allow it to speak to that part of me for which I'll never have words. This poem doesn't want to tell you a story you can follow. It wants to take you to a river, blindfold you, lower you into its veins. So yeah, that's the poem I was thinking about. I
Yeah.
think they're
I think it's interesting that often in the book you write about the writing of the book, about the writing of poems.
yeah, yeah. Actually, that's the subtext in the book. The ars poetic. The I guess I always. Uh, I mean, they're kind of like just placeholders, like this poem, this poem. I could put something else, but at the end, I kind of like how it sounded. You know what I'm saying?
Uh-huh,
Uh,
uh-huh, uh-huh.
and I just left them like that.
I
But but but
wonderful.
but as a writer, when I start writing poems, and I have no idea where I want to go or whatever, always address the poem, or address myself writing the poem. And then later on, I go back and get rid of it. But sometimes it just feels right. So I just leave it. Though it might be cliche or whatever. If I like it, I like it. And of course, you try using that I guess template uh, kind of challenges me even more to take the poem somewhere unexpected, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and so in this case, and in the case of other poems where there's that, meta poetic impulse, that's what I tried to do. But it was intentional, and fully aware that for some people hate that and they might be cliche, but
I'm a love it. I find it very, very interesting and very
what do you, in
moving.
your own book, in your own poems, what did you find yourself returning to, or what kind of device or artifice, poetic artifice, did you find yourself kind of returning to articulate the grief, loss, poetics, nature?
Yeah. Oh, what an interesting question. Um, well, I guess I'm going to fall back on the idea of time and the way that the book works in circles of time, both with the present thread running through like a ceremony. That's what the book of hours is, to hold me
Yeah.
in the present. And then the various seasons of the year, but going back to the past and then coming forward into um, another present. So the present in the poems uh, uh, sometimes echoes with the poems that take place in the past. Because I wanted to blur those boundaries of time. Um, I didn't want them anymore. uh, so I would
Is that
say
all?
I
Is
would
that
say
all?
that's the one way of, yeah, that's one kind of poetic
Is that
device.
also the reason why there's no page numbers in the book? It's
Exactly.
just
Yeah. I didn't want the book to be separated into parts. Like, I'm just going to read this. I mean, you could. I mean, you can read it anywhere, in any order you want, of course. But the idea of having no page numbers keeps it whole. And once life
I
has been so ruptured,
right. If you intended that, how come you used punctuation? And here
oh,
and here I'm thinking about, I don't know if it was it was Merwin who said something about how he stopped using punctuation because he felt that it nailed the words to the page or something.
It's interesting.
So you didn't want separations and you wanted. So I'm just wondering, did it
Well,
ever
I
cross
guess
your mind
why
that
did I keep space between the words so that people could read them? You know,
yeah, but punctuation is different. Spacing is
punctuation is different. Um, and I think for me, a lack of punctuation would have looked very contrived. Something that I would have had to have thought very hard about taking it out, and then it would have looked odd. It would not have
okay.
looked whole. It would have looked broken, you know, would
Okay.
not have looked the way I
Yeah,
intended.
it would have been too heavy. So yeah, okay,
Yeah.
I see what you're.
Yeah, that would definitely not have been me. Um,
Do you
yeah.
want to read something else you said?
Oh, did I? I don't know.
I interrupted you because before I
I
forgot
didn't.
before I forgot about the punctuation.
You may interrupt me and ask anything you like. This is a conversation. Um, I am thinking about your our separation. That's the little poem, though. And one of my little poems, not an hour, this one that's called Grief. I'll read that one. And then I'll read the hour, which is just one very small line that follows it. We cannot live here. When we enter, our voices become hollow vowels, hovering on the tips of coral fingers. Our breath breaks into foam, shuddering in the current to the seagrass, where our flesh sheds its salt and our bones bloom. That howl tonight is the curl of a wave, which makes me think of water. And now I'm thinking of water remembers everything. Your poem.
My poem, yeah, the water remembers. Yeah, that's the last poem of the first section of the book. Do you want me to read that?
Yeah.
Because we're talking about water.
Yeah, now we're on water.
Okay, there you are. Okay, here it is. Water remembers everything. In a dream, the water doesn't speak, doesn't tell you anything, doesn't tell you how much you have aged, how much weight you have gained, how the house where you were born is lost, how strangers live there. I have no idea who you are. When you wake, your mother's mind remains a silver lake where you dip your name to see if you can raise it whole again. And you do, because el agua lo recuerda todo. And it remembers him as you stand here once again in the shadow of your thirst, seeing yourself smile in the glass.
I love that poem. It's beautiful. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That it's interesting. I think that's like the happiest poem in the book
I don't think I have any happy ones.
because I mean it's not happy, but it's the happiest because I wrote it. Uh, I don't know. I don't know how often this is San Antonio, but there's a park here uh, that that it was my legacy project for my my time as poet laureate, and I got commissioned to write this poem,
Yeah.
and I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna make it kind of light, but it's not right, obviously. But
Yeah. Yeah. No, I like it. And I'm thinking also about the dream. That's so the poem of mine that came to my mind with that is actually Cemetery Bees, which is
yeah,
not a poem about, well, it is about water, actually, isn't it? And there is water in this poem.
yeah, and there's a lot of
But the
listen,
dream,
Yeah, it's a lot. The moon stars come up again. One of my favorite. Is it okay if I read one of your little poems of the hours here that I really love?
Absolutely, sure.
Yeah, I think this is one of the most touching for me after having read the poems that came before it, and then it gets to this moment. Um, yeah, it was kind of like it was very, it was like it was very touching, heartbreaking, because you say everything without saying it. But if you read the poems and then you know exactly what you're talking about. And it's, some nights I wake in the some nights I wake in the middle and see a star out our bedroom window, hovering in the bare trees above the horizon. I believe it is Polaris. Yeah, and I think for the audience, you're probably like, well, but once you read what came before, I think this was like a beautiful placement of that. And so going back to this idea of some of the recurring images and motifs that you have in the book, water, dreams, uh, hummingbirds, the moon, things like that. I think in many ways can be found uh, in my own poems here. So,
I was thinking about the visual arts because that's one of the things that when we're paired together, um, people say, Marcela has said, that we are both visual artists and we are both poets. Obviously, the visual arts play a part in this book, a very strong and apparent one. Um, whereas my paintings, which are quite different from yours, um, are kind of like the hours, right? So if someone were to go back and or to look at my paintings, what they would see are those same kinds of lyric observations, just quick um, moments. And I guess what I'm thinking is how image works in both of our books.
well, you kind of connect for referencing the hours, which is a way to reference time and painting. It's making me more think more about time and the act of creation, specifically painting. And one of the things that I'm realizing is that painting, the sense of time disappears.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
Something that doesn't necessarily happen when I'm writing. Maybe because when I'm writing, I need to be mentally more alert. Well, I don't know, like thinking more. But when I'm painting, I'm thinking with a brain I didn't know I had.
Mhm.
Brain that doesn't understand time,
Mhm.
that doesn't recognize it. And so I paint at 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and before you know it, it's 6, and I have no idea where I've been.
Yeah,
It's like I'm pure spirit. And and I have no idea what I want to say with that,
yeah.
other than what that it is, that
Then it
time.
is. Yeah. I think it's very important for me, and I'm hearing it in you as well, to get away from words sometimes. You know, that, well, we're both academics as well, so we can go off on that in the world of language. But the uh, when I have been in the hardest moments of my life, there were no words. I mean, it sounds trite and cliche to say there are no words, but
Right.
literally there were no words. And it took a long time before I could put this book together or write the poems that I wrote for it, in it. Um, and I think that the greatest reason of that is it is using another part of the mind. It's not the brain, it's the mind, um, the heart. It's accessing emotion and even idea and imagination um, on a subconscious level, an unconscious level, even. You know, but it's allowing things to arise to the surface and to express them,
Right.
but not be contained in language, be restricted in the language.
As I'm hearing you speak, I'm thinking, and I wanted to ask you, did your book overall, I mean, it's a book of it's a book of grief. It's, did grief change your relationship to language?
Mm.
Because you're saying like, you were saying like sometimes there's no words or there's so I'm just thinking, thinking what you think or that that there was a change or
Yeah, I think grief changed my relationship to everything, um, and most definitely to language. In thinking about language and how to use it as an art differently. I'm no longer interested in poetry prompts and exercises and all those things that people use
right.
to start. There's nothing wrong with those, don't get me wrong. But none of those have at this still any what is the word, commerce with me.
Yeah.
I need to get into the meditative state, the contemplative state, and then let the poem come the way that I let a painting come, um, or whatever
like
it is to say.
like writing from another place or something. Um, yeah. Now, I was just curious about that.
What do you think? Has grief changed the way, does loss change your relationship to language?
Um, I I think I think I'm beginning to accept the fact that I'm in a state of continuous grief.
Mm-hmm.
I've never made peace with it. I'm never going to make peace with it. Poetry doesn't heal me. Poetry doesn't do shit for me
Yeah,
in
yeah.
terms of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a way to survive for me. It's a way to not go crazy, to create
Yeah.
art. It's a way to um, accommodate the world in my life and vice versa. And I love it, right? Obviously, but um, but I don't think whatever losses I've had, specifically in my formative years with my own experience, it's never going to go away. It's always going to be part of my lexicon as a poet.
Of course. Mm-hmm.
I think the challenge for me as a poet is how to not write about it, or if I'm writing about it, how to make it seem like I'm not writing about it, or how to write about it differently, how to find new language, um, new narratives to to go beyond that, to transcend that, which I don't know if I ever will be able to do that. Um, and I think I don't know if it's a change or my relationship to language, but I really I think I am more willing to take more emotional risks with language,
Mm.
to like you say, like kind of reference this idea of I'm writing from a phrase. nothing against them, but I don't need prompts to write. I don't need any of that stuff. I'm gonna write. It's gonna come from a place. It's coming from a prompt inside myself, something that's already there for me to explore.
Yeah.
And so I'm okay. Something that most of us who went through MFAs or PhD writing programs, you know, often you heard, oh, it's sentimental. Oh, why do you have tears in your eyes? It's I freaking want to, man. But of course,
I
but
hear you.
but
I hear
obviously,
you.
yeah, I mean, my kids, I want to, I want to challenge myself, but it, I feel good to. I guess I'm going to point this writer to say, okay, this is how it feels, and I think you and I, maybe because we are visual artists, we work a lot with image.
Mhm.
So we explore emotion, we explore the world. In my case, I can't speak for you, but and I see it in your work, um, with images, specifically those images that as I referenced before, we can find outside of ourselves, which is relationship to nature. So I think that's all I can say about it. I guess I got to think about it more. But but yeah, that's my relationship to that right now, to language, to say, what, it's okay to say certain things in the context of something else, complicating simple statements, for example, because I love simple statements like sad. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to say, give yourself permission, give ourselves permission to say what we say the way that we say it. But that sounds so easy. And we're not really thinking about that
Yeah.
as we move into it. Um, wow. Okay, I'm going to request another of your poems. How about Essay on Loss? Where am I looking
Yeah.
in my book for you?
Yeah. You have a page number?
I will. I will indeed. It's got one of these colored tabs on it. Let's
Feel
see.
like feel like
It is
person
on
in school.
page 25.
Okay. I promise next time if I get invited to something like this, I'm gonna have a copy of my book.
Novel idea.
Straight up, because it's bullshit. Okay. Here it is. Essay on loss. Because I'm the horse fountain in the river. Because I am the bull not fit for sacrifice. Because I miss you. Because I lost myself in drowning. Because this morning the sunlight was insufficient. Because I liked seeing you eat with your hands. Because I still remember your mother's voice. Because she's now on her deathbed and God has forgotten how to tie her shoes. Because I can hear the rooster's dark crow keep my window on. Because I have no door to open, walk back into myself. Because my thirst is an unsung song in the universe.
Yeah.
What do you got for us?
I am going to ask you a question about that, but I
Okay.
will read you a poem that, yeah, that I feel like I also heard when I was reading this one, thinking about the two books being in conversation, listening to the two books be in conversation. This is Solstice Morning. Standing at the kitchen sink, I peel a valley orange, pull the sweet flesh clean with my fingers, not how you would bite, leaving behind the bitter white rind. If I'd been the first to die, would you be standing here looking at what's left of the fruit, remembering how I'd pare the membrane for you tenderly? And then the hour that follows that, the moon is a dark crescent, smudged into the sky, where there is snow, but only in the air.
Yeah, I made a what this idea of what if I had died for you. Which is kind of interesting. What if you had died for your beloved? Would he be writing music for you? Would he be writing poetry for you? You don't know, right? Which
Right.
speaks to this idea you also write about. When do we start remembering? I mean, uh, see your book as a continuous conversation with him in many ways, many levels. Uh, which kind of brings us to maybe questions about the role of poets, right? And storytellers and how we keep memory alive. I feel like I don't know. I don't think I've ever been loved by a poet, so they were not. Nobody's ever going to write about it, which is fine. Who cares? But you
There's
see what I'm
time
talking?
yet, Octavio.
Yeah, you see what I'm talking about in my case. Poet, I have volumes and people. It takes us back to William Shakespeare, right? But to me, that was just an interesting question. What if? Um, how are we just going to remember us? Not that it really matters, but I think that can also be a part of conversations as writers and poets. Since we're always, I was going to use the word traveling, but I'm not because I hate that word. Because we're always dealing with others,
Mhm.
working in memory of others. I mean, like that, um, the Sparrows is it's a document about basically my parents, right? And the love I have for them. Um, and how that document will live on, I hope. So
Well,
I'm thinking about how that works. I don't know.
well, you,
Just
you
making
know,
me. Yes.
okay, now you got me thinking of another of your poems
Okay.
and another of my poems because we're talking about memory. Your poem, Remember. Let's see what page Remember is on.
Remember,
I don't want to say it's on this.
or you can just say part three, part two. Oh, I found it.
You found it?
Read that. Remember,
Uh-huh.
remember how the day loses a daughter every night, only to not remember her in the morning. Why? I can't say. Yet it is as true as two zeros canceling each other out. An equation I've written 1,000 times. I'll keep writing it till the fire of its message doesn't burn my fingers, till my breathing Breathing becomes an open window, and I have no more faith left to jump out of it. Here, forgive me, for I must travel through this world without knowing what it means to sail east, fly north, train west, or bus south. I'm losing the metals of my native land, and I ask myself, what land is my native land? My children will never know how my tongue itches to speak to the dead, speak to those who took the accents of the past and memorized and got them filed in the blurred regions of their new country. When will they return to usher me along the forgotten trails? And if they return, will they say, that day you fell from the skinny branch of a tree and your father lifted you like a wounded sparrow in his arms, carried you to bed? Will they say, you were an obedient boy, you owned a red bison, a hand-me-down, and you were happy sometimes? You were sad too when you had no will to invent your own apple. Even now, words don't say enough about who I think I was before I became. I wish I could forget everything, even how I got here and how I brought you to this point of my story, knowing full well that soon you'll remember nothing.
Yes, 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 yes.
Thank you.
I'm going to read in memory. So soon we dissolve in memory as the body grows into earth and becomes what consumes its tender bones and so on. Generations of flesh from flesh, cleaved as one forgetting, forgotten, not the first long forgotten. So we're held by the living only a breath as they too expire or lose their minds, where we may yet wander anonymous for the last ages, confused with an ancestor or heir, or the neighbor who brings a dozen eggs, or complains about the dandelions creeping into his lawn to set taproots and feed bees that displace St. Augustine sod, making a wilderness near the buckled sidewalk like an abandoned cemetery, the kind with crooked monuments and fading names. So we evaporate into the cloud of consciousness where no one remembers us, and we can never forget or be forgotten.
Hi, friends.
Hi, Lisa.
We are, believe it or not, almost to our time, and we have a couple of questions from folks, if you're ready for those.
Sure.
The first is from Cheryl, who asks, how does the writer's brain work when writing in second language versus an original language? Does form help or hinder? And I think that's for both of you.
Octavio, to me, you don't have a second language, you have two languages. I have a second language, and I don't ordinarily use form as a way. Like I said earlier, my mind works in the two languages in a way that is channeling the past. It's bringing back into conversation the way that conversations happened here. And so that, yeah, I don't think about crafting into form so much. Yeah.
Talking about inherited forms, just form in terms of the organic form.
That's a good question.
I mean, when I use the second language in a poem, I'm more than likely trying to emphasize the form of music, syllabic count. Um, I'm tapping into the ear,
Yeah.
which is music is in poetry. Obviously, it's part of It's part of its essence. But if you're asking me, when you write a sonnet, do you has that shape it? I don't know. I don't. I love writing sonnets, but um, I have never blended the two languages, so I don't know what kind of um, dissonance
Mhm.
might be caused by that.
Okay. Our next question is, since you are both visual artists, is there something different in feeling as you look at a painting you've done versus reading a poem, as in like your re-inhabituation of the work?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I see. I see. Uh, I love abstract art. Okay, that's my thing. Abstraction, and abstract art makes me emotional.
Mm.
Like, I'm not saying all of it, but figurative art. Yeah, artists have skill, blah blah blah, beautiful. But abstraction, some abstract art just makes me emotional.
Yeah.
Uh, in the same way that in a lot of poetry that I love, the concreteness of the words and the images make me emotional. Uh, so there's two different experiences. Like I said with before, I kind of referenced this idea of losing the sense of time when painting. I think it might be similar to how I feel when I read a poem and when I look at a work of art, an abstract work. Meaning, when I look at a work of art, an abstract work of art, it's like pure emotion. It's music. Uh, when I read a poem, it makes me feel it's not. It's like a different. It's like a different layering, uh, a different experience of time
Mm.
that I know eventually is going to lead me to this moment if the poem's successful for me to explode inside in some way, to feel what I would feel by looking at an abstract piece of art that probably made no sense because I never thought about this, but
It made good sense. That made good sense.
Fun to think about though, right? I think,
Mhm.
yeah. What about you, Catherine?
I think I referenced earlier that there's a difference between Octavio's visual art and mine, significant difference because mine is primarily botanicals and wildlife, small creatures, especially lately. I've been doing non-charismatic creatures, bugs, things like that. Um, and they are very representational. Obviously they don't look like a photograph. They look like a painting, watercolor and ink, which is what I primarily use. And I think that they are like my poems in that the images within the poems are often observations of the natural world. Um,
Mm.
so there's a correspondence there. But I would say that rather than eliciting or expressing an emotion, my visual art is meditative. It's very much a way of entering into the contemplative state where I may write a poem as I am in that trance, but I've gotten there by paying very, very, very careful attention to the feathers on this blue jay, right? Or, or the hummingbird in flight, whatever it is that I've decided to spend my afternoon getting to know closely.
It's interesting that you say that because I think all the time, is it the Mary Oliver quote? Or someone said that like good poetry pays attention. And you just mentioned what you've paid your attention to for that afternoon.
Yeah,
That's really beautiful. How do you two feel? Do you want to end on those questions, or would you each like to read a final poem?
What do you think, Octavio? Want to read a poem?
Let's read a poem. That
Okay.
sounds good.
You choose one of yours. I'll choose one of mine.
How to read this poem that I felt was the beginning of this book. That kind of stuck with me for 10 years until it's called Parting. There was a time I had no word, and so I said darkness. I had no word to say devotion, and so I said two sons grieving one mother. A time came when parents sat under a tree and sobbed for us, their sons, on their way to a new country. When I tried to return to my boyhood, sometimes I end up a grown man with my head on my mother's lap.
Yes, yes. I'll read Earth Sign and the hour that follows it. And in the dream, you come to me as a mountain lion and say, not simply life as the animation of the senses, or flow of blood or chlorophyll, but as what lights the crystal quartz and flows from the black obsidian. Life that rises from the dead, for which there is no word in our language, and gives the luminosity of the dark. Life that is the mystery of the mayfly and the mountain, muffled rain song, naked branches of the apricot tree. Life gazing at the horizon from the rail of a rocking ferry, or at moonlit stones in the bed of a moving stream. Spirits of Orpheus, the morning doves sing to light the morning. It was spring then, too. All night, we were traveling in the stars, in the dark between. Twice I woke and worried that I would not be able to sleep again, the way one worries asleep on a train about missing a stop. Then the light glowing through our window woke me to sojourn. Esperar, espérame, espero.
Thank you so much. I can't believe it's now 9 o'clock. It sometimes you get lost in that time of experiencing poems and experiencing each other's work. So I just want to again say thank you to both of you for your time. Lisa has put some links in the chat for the Notebooks Collective so that you could potentially come to future events that we have. A note, we'll have this conversation up on YouTube hopefully within the week. And now if anyone wants to drop any last remarks in the chat or unmute and do a round of applause, we always welcome that.
Yay!
Thank you all for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for being
Thank you.
And with that, we will say goodnight and look forward to seeing you all again soon.
Good night, everybody.
Yeah.
Good night.